Welcome to Our Hen House. This is Marianne Sullivan.
And this is Jasmine Singer.
And this week, Jasmine will be speaking with Christine Benson. She is the author of a book called Marrying Myself, a book I tremendously enjoyed. And if, like me, your secret or not so secret pleasure is romance novels, or if you're definitely not so secret pleasure, at least it better be not so secret, is vegan advocacy, and you would like to see how to put them together, this is the interview for you. Don't you just love it when a book has a vegan character?
Yeah, and chatting with Christine was really fun. She's super smart. And we talked a lot about how there's, definitely not enough representation of vegans in media. And especially when it's not like necessarily about their veganism completely. They just happen to be vegan. So I get really excited.
As I said, I read the book as well. And I really liked the way she worked it in. It was not a main focus of the book, not a main focus of the character, but she definitely got in some advocacy here and there. I don't think it was overdone, though, most people get a little defensive, but I think she did it really, really well. And she made one of the creepiest characters to be the most anti-vegan. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, you'll look forward to this conversation if you're listening to this. I can't wait for you to hear it. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Here we are, 2023.
Yeah, we started our hen house this month, 13 years ago, in that little cafe in Philadelphia. Remember?
Oh, yeah. It was really cold out.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I remember that? It's not like it's not cold out a lot in January, but it was unbelievably cold out.
And it was. But I don't think at that time we could have ever conceived of the fact that we would be here now and doing this 13 years later. So it's really fun. And we made our match. That's a wonderful way to start the new year. We made our end of year fundraising match. So I just want to give the biggest, most heartfelt thank you to our listeners. Truly, I love you, each of you. And it was so moving to get the emails about donations coming in those last few days of the year.
Like every single year, it's always so stressful.
I know.
It's always down to the wire. Well, a lot of people do their donating on January 31st. I think for a lot of people, that's a really...
Yeah.
Oh, December 31st. Yeah. Oh, maybe there's more coming in on January 30th. Oh, there is.
Right. Yeah, no, they do. And it's partly so tight to the wire because I think a lot of small nonprofits, like we're budgeting for a lot of the income we're getting. So that's what makes it so scary. That's what makes it so tight. Yeah. Like we don't know what we're going to have to do with the budget until the very end.
We know how much money we've got or if we've got any money at all. So thank you, everybody. It was really, really just a thrilling moment when we hit that number.
Totally.
And you've been having a lot of thrilling moments lately. You're going to talk more about your new job. Are you going to talk about it every week?
No.
Because we all want updates.
I'm not going to talk about it every week, but if you're listening regularly, you know that I am the new weekend host of Weekend Edition for WXXI, which is an NPR affiliate here in Rochester. And I've been in training for a little over a month or so. And this past weekend, I actually did my first full newscast myself. So it was like a few hours, sporadically. And I really appreciate that you listened, Marianne. It was very kind.
Yeah. You're not on the air for a few hours. You break in with the news. And then there are other stories intermittently.
And I also am producing and hosting segments as well throughout the week. So I have one going out, I think maybe today. I'm not sure. And I was able to get some vegan restaurants on there, even though it wasn't directly related to the story. So that was cool.
Nice move.
Yeah. So it was terrifying. I have to tell you, I started on January 1st. I got in at 5 a.m. to be extra prepared. And the first time I'm supposed to go on the air is 7. And so I had someone with me still training me. She was just shadowing me and she was in the other room. And at 7, I go to do my broadcast. It's the first time I'm hitting the button, the first time I'm pulling the lever, the first time I'm working on the board. And I get started and in my ear, I hear national, like I hear NPR. I don't hear myself, which means that's what people are hearing. And I'm like completely flipping out because I'm trying to maintain my cool. But inside, I'm like, what the hell is going on?
It's all over. It's all over.
Yeah, no, people, like thousands of people
hate me
right now. So the person training me comes in. She has no idea what's going on. And I text my so she turns my mic off eventually. I text my boss and he's like, "Oh, it's a holiday. I thought I told you that there's no broadcast at 7 today. It starts at 8." And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I still thought that I had taken over the board and that people heard me over National, like both of our voices at the same time. But I later found out they didn't, that was not possible. But that was how I started.
I didn't hear that part. So I wasn't able to tell you whether you were on there because it was New Year's Day at 7:00 in the morning.
Well, that's the other good thing. No one was really listening. But thankfully, that isn't what happened. So I jumped on with my 8:00. But that was how I started my radio career, which was...
Sounds stressful.
It was pretty funny, yeah. So afterwards on Sunday, I did something. This was New Year's Day again. I did something sort of not like me, but I took a restorative yoga class. And, calling it yoga is a bit of a stretch.
Good
but
one.
It is basically like getting into these positions that you're fully supported in with like bolsters. And then you're like totally giving your weight and your energy to them. And I started crying at one point. It wasn't even emotional. It was just like, I was so anxious from the morning that like, it kind of just like needed to escape. And I have to tell you the most exciting thing about this place, which I did sign up for as a new student. The owner is vegan and she's like got a kid and she's raising the kid vegan and like she's animal rights vegan. And there's an event coming up, like a retreat, a restorative yoga retreat, which I'm going to go to partly for part of the day. And it's vegan. They're being catered by Allah's Kitchen, which is this vegan place. So
that's amazing.
Cool. Yeah, but it shouldn't be, right?
It shouldn't, nothing should be the way it is. But it is often the case that vegans are not, that yoga people and yoga studios are not at all vegan. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
But the other possibility is that it's like Jivamukti in New York City, which I've been to, which is totally vegan, passionately vegan advocacy. But the yoga is well beyond my capacities. So it sounds like this place has it all. It not only is vegan, but it has yoga that I would actually be able to do without killing myself.
Yeah, well, actually, they did have to adjust a position. There were only like 3 or 4 positions the whole time, and they had to adjust one of mine for those 3 or 4 because... Anyway, I won't bore you with it.
Well, I haven't gone yet because of did you all know I had knee surgery?
I think people
if you've listened before, I've whined about it many times. But I do want to go there because it sounds perfect. So hard to find the right yoga place.
By the way, so speaking of things that we kind of like found the vegan slice of, I found the vegan yoga place in Rochester. We actually went out on New Year's Eve at very early, like 5:00, because I was going to bed at like 8, which we did celebrate the UK's New Year. We celebrated at R7, which was fun. And then I went to bed. But at 5:00, we went to get Korean food because I had the most amazing Korean food in LA a couple weeks ago when I was there. I think I talked about it. And so we found a couple Korean restaurants here in Rochester and they speak vegan and there's not like a whole lot of selections, but it was so friggin' good. It's like my new favorite place. I love it.
Yeah, I know. I had a real longing for Korean food as well. And this place just really hit the spot. They did only have just a couple of dishes, but the server was completely familiar with what vegan meant. There are a few little I don't know what you call them, amuse-bouches. It was not a fancy place, but a few little appetizer things that they give you for free. And when she brought them, she said, "I only brought the vegan one," which was really nice. Yeah. But the food was so good. I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been eating very blah food, but it was so tasty. I love Korean food. And, there's great vegan Korean restaurants in New York City. Really, really amazing. Yeah. But most people identify Korean food with barbecue. And I've never been to a barbecue restaurant, and I don't think I ever will be. But there's a lot more to Korean food than barbecue.
So sort of switching gears a little bit, I wanted to chat briefly about this Guardian article that you found because it was so touching and so moving. And I'm going to put it in the show notes so that others can be touched and moved as well. So why don't you talk about this a little bit?
There's no news here. It was just such a lovely article. I wanted other people to be aware of it as well. And it's by a guy named Benjamin Zephaniah. He's basically writing on why he's going to stop saying he doesn't eat meat. That's basically the title of the article. I'll stop saying I don't eat meat and tell people I don't eat animals. The thing I'll do differently in 2023. And it's apparently a series The Guardian was doing of people's commitments to do something a little differently. And it's just the loveliest article. And I'm going to read a little bit about how it all came about for him to stop eating animals. And, it's really making me think, like, that's a really good way to put it. He just sounds like a very gentle person. He doesn't want to offend anybody, but he also doesn't want to cheat the animals of stating why he really feels the way he does. And this is a little bit of his history. I was 9 when I decided to stop eating animals. My twin sister and I were the only Black children in school. I experienced racism in and out of the classroom. So in the playground, I would often find myself sitting in a corner talking to the local cats. When the cats were away, I'd talk to the birds and the bees. Amazingly, I never met a racist animal. Some were nervous when they first approached me. Some would make a few visits before they got close. But it never took long for us to make a connection. Then we would just hang out together.
Oh my God. That's so sweet. I love that. I love hanging out with those animals too. So I pulled up part that I liked. It was not that part, even though I also liked that part. And let me tell you what it was. So this is a spoiler because it's toward the end of the essay. So sorry, but people should read the whole thing. I once decided that I would never ask people if they were okay unless I really meant it, and I was prepared to listen and help if they weren't. A long time ago, I decided never to tell people to stay in touch if I didn't really mean it. I won't even tell people that it's good to see them if I don't mean it. I just want my interactions with people to be genuine. I don't really know anything about meat. I don't lie in bed at night thinking about meat. So from next year onwards, I'm going to tell people the truth. I don't eat animals, but I won't be telling you because now you know. And that by the way, there are so many things in that part of the essay that really resonated with me. And I want to let that inspire me because I think that I have my moments where I get into like just being too polite or something and kind of blowing smoke up people's ass if that's what the moment sort of needs. But I don't want to do that.
It can be very tricky to be both honest and kind at the same time. I think it's really a goal to work toward.
Yeah, agreed. So just a nice way of starting off the new year, and happy new year to everyone out there. I'm also really excited to be starting with talking about fiction because I hope in 2023 there's more and more fiction when it comes to vegan representation and animal rights and advocacy for social justice issues that we care about. So Chrissy or Christine, she goes by both, really is the perfect person, in my opinion, to start off the year with.
Yeah, I hope this inspires some people to get their fiction going, because I know a lot of people think about writing and then don't. So maybe you should think about it a little harder. Christine Benson is an attorney, a short story author, a legal writer, news satire writer, passionate vegan, and host of the Vegan Posse podcast. Marrying Myself is Christine's first novel. Formerly of Boston and New York City, Christine now makes her home in Nashville, Tennessee. She will be joining Jasmine right after this.
Greetings, listeners. Just a reminder that if you are a Flock member, you will get a link to the bonus segment in your email on the Tuesday after this podcast episode goes up, or you can always find it on the Flock Facebook group. And if you're not a member of the Flock and you can afford it, you can join for $10 a month or $100 a year at ourhenhouse.org/donate.
Also, if you are a Flock member, please join us for our Flock First Friday Zoom calls, which are once a month on the first Friday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern, where we have inspiring guests and great conversations about activism and animals and life in general.
So if you're a member of the Flock, check out that Flock Facebook group for updates or write to us at info@ourhenhouse.org. And if you write to info@ourhenhouse.org, you can also set up a one-on-one conversation with me too, which I hope you do because I always have a lot of fun and I want you to also.
And thanks so much for joining us in our mission to change the world for animals.
Bye. Welcome to our hen house, Christine.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, so am I. I'm thrilled that I'm here and I'm thrilled that you're here because I love talking about what we're going to be talking about today. And congratulations about your new book, Marrying Myself. It is absolutely, completely thrilling for anyone who reads to be exposed to a book where there are vegan characters. So thank you for putting it out into the world and for joining us. My first question, if you can just tell our listeners a little bit about Marrying Myself and how it is connected to veganism and animal advocacy.
Well, Marrying Myself is women's fiction, so it's a very fun read. It's about a woman who's engaged to be married to the love of her life, her true soulmate. And I won't give it all away, but things don't go quite according to plan. He also happens to be incredibly wealthy, although that's not why she's marrying him. So again, things go somewhat awry. And so it's fun, light read, but kind of with a deeper message about figuring out who we are and what matters when the whole image we had of what our life was going to look like is suddenly out the window. And the vegan component comes in that the protagonist, Julia Jones, is vegan. So a little backstory. When I first started writing this book, I myself was not vegan. Oh. And then I became vegan maybe a year into working on the book. And then I had to make my protagonist vegan because I just couldn't in good conscience, implicitly endorse eating animals and animal products when I had stumbled onto a way of life that I felt like was the ethical way to live. So Julia changed along with me. And then it became a bit of a quandary about how many characters in the book were going to be vegan. Am I going to pretend that I'm in this fictional vegan universe, which isn't quite realistic? But that's where it all began.
Wow. I had no idea that you went vegan while writing it. That speaks to the power of the arts and advocacy, which I know is something we're both really passionate about. And it reminded me of Liz Marshall went vegan. She's a filmmaker, and she went vegan while making the film The Ghosts in Our Machine, which just sort of added this layer of, kind of authenticity and badassery, if I can just use that word for a minute. So in making, well, I have so many questions for you. I love that she changed you. That is something that happens, right? Like when we're writing fiction, the characters have an impact on us. Are we like Sybil? Are we like nuts? Or like, what do you think? How does it change you?
Well, I would say we are nuts, but in the best possible way. I mean, to me, there are different universes, and the worlds that we create through our art are just as real in some senses as, the worlds that we walk around in and live in. So I can't quite give Julia credit for changing me. However, I more changed her. But, in hindsight, I really think that Julia herself as a character was going to go vegan at some point, whether it happened in this book or in some future fictional universe, because she has those components, the necessary components, compassion, self-reflection, love of animals, a strong inclination toward justice. It was going to happen. It just coincidentally happened in this book while I was writing it.
That's fascinating to me. So in making your main character vegan, all right, I'm just going to sort of play, I don't know if it's devil's advocate or if it's like a curious advocate. I don't know. But are you limiting your chances of getting a publisher?
Yeah, I wondered about that. I did wonder about that. And it's funny because my publisher is actually an independent press in Texas. So you wouldn't think that they'd be particularly, open to a vegan protagonist and vegan romance story. But they were. So I did wrestle with that a little bit. And for me, it was a question of how I wanted to present this book to the world and what aspects I wanted to promote. So certainly I wanted vegans to know about it because I know that vegans are craving representation in fiction. There just isn't a ton of vegan characterization out there in the world of fiction, particularly mainstream women's fiction, which is the genre that my book falls into. But I also didn't want to limit my audience to just vegans because you know how vegans are. We find the vegan things. If you open a vegan restaurant or a vegan coffee shop, you don't have to worry too much about letting the vegans know about it because they're going to be on it. So I knew that vegans would find my book. And I really wanted to make it accessible and appealing to people in general, particularly women. I didn't overly highlight the vegan aspect of the book when I was shopping it around to agents and then to publishers. I played around with it a little bit. With some people, I did highlight that a little more, and made a big deal about, the world of mainstream women's fiction is ready for a vegan protagonist. And, here she is. But I don't know that that was particularly effective in shopping around the book. I really just wanted to present it for what it is, which is a good story, a story that's fun and funny, but with substance that kind of leaves you with something to think about after you finish reading it. And then the vegan component, again, depending on my audience, I highlight that more or less, but I do hope that it has an impact because like all vegans, I have that not so secret agenda of, veganizing the planet.
Right. Yes. And we love you for that secret agenda and we share it too. I actually wrote my first fiction piece in a long time. I wrote a YA book, which I'm currently working on edits for it with my agent. And it's my two books that came out are both nonfiction. So it's a big leap and it's kind of exactly for the reasons you just said, which are like, well, let's kind of get an audience who is just very interested in a particular genre. In my case, it's YA. In your case, it's romance, but also just like women's fiction, as you said. And you kind of sneak it in because people look at any art in a sort of more open-minded way, I think. So I have two questions for you. One, why romance? And two, I'd love your thoughts on what I just said about how the arts seems to make people a bit more open-hearted to take in messages such as veganism.
I never thought of myself, and I still don't think of myself as a romance writer. The way this novel came about was that I was living in Boston at the time, which is where the book is set. And I had a friend who I was pretty close to at the time who was very artsy, kind of flaky. She'd done a lot of theater and acting. And she came to me pretty out of the blue one day and she said, I know you like to write and I want to do some more writing. And I've done all this research and the only genre of books that are increasing in profitability are romance and women's fiction, chick lit. So she said, why don't we write a book together, like a romance novel together? And, at the time I thought, well, that's not really what I'm particularly interested in writing, but sure, it's an opportunity. I'm going to take it. It's a chance to nudge myself into doing more writing. So the two of us got together and just came up with a basic plot component, which is essentially that a woman's engaged to marry this dream soulmate who's incredibly wealthy. Things don't quite work out. So that was about as much as we planned out together. And then we went our separate ways. And the plan was that we would each write a few chapters every week and trade chapters and, continue that way until the novel was done. And like I said, this girl is wonderful, but she was always pretty flaky. So I went off and did my first chapter, wrote the first chapter of the book and, had a lot of fun with it and sent it off to her. And then I literally never heard from her again. It wasn't an intentional ghosting or anything. I think she just got busy and caught up in other things. I stewed about it for a week or two. And then I thought, well, screw her. I'll just finish writing the book myself. I'll bang it out in 6 months. It's a romance book. I'll just write it really fast and crank it out. And so now 10 plus years later, here we are. But that was the backstory.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So what about, gosh, I have too many questions for you. What about the arts? Like, tell me about your feeling regarding the sort of openness that creates for people. You agree with me? I'm like assuming you agree.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I totally agree with you. And I think that's especially true of humor. I'm also a huge fan of satire, and I've written a lot of Onion style spoof news stories. And so I really feel like humor especially opens people up to thinking about things in a different way and seeing a new perspective. And the arts just in general, I think, are so powerful because they really need to stand on their own. This novel, I don't think would have worked if I had set out with my vegan agenda, going into it. I didn't start out saying I'm going to write a novel that normalizes veganism. I set out thinking I'm going to write a novel that says something and speaks to people, and it's going to be what it is. And my protagonist is vegan, and that will have the ripple effect that it has. But I don't think we can control our art in a really, agenda-oriented way. Or if we do, it won't come off feeling authentic. And like I said, Julia herself is a character, and she's her own being. And so she was going to be vegan. She simply was, like, whether it happened with me or in the imaginary universe where she lives, she just was going to get there. So the way I see writing, I don't know if this was how it worked with you in your YA novel, but I really believe strongly in the power of characters. And once I come up with my characters, I just kind of let them do their thing. They run loose. And sometimes it surprises me what happens in the book. So the vegan aspect was a little bit of a surprise. There were many scenes in the novel that came as a surprise to me. I did not expect certain turns of events in the book. But again, they were just my characters doing their thing. So yeah, I think the arts are incredible, but again, we can't control them. We can't manipulate them into saying what we want them to say, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. I feel so validated because when I was writing the YA book, it's like every morning I would write early in the morning. Every morning I'd be like saying goodbye to my wife. I'd be like, all right, I'm going into Narnia now. Like, it's just this whole world of people who have this life that I'm fascinated by. And it is a very humbling experience to be able to sort of be the vessel for their stories unfolding. And put on top of that I almost said our secret gay agenda. Well, there's that too. But put on top of that the secret vegan agenda. And it's really very powerful. For me, it was almost a spiritual experience. Did you have that?
Yes, definitely a spiritual experience in the sense that, it sounds so convoluted, but you really do feel like a vessel when you're just writing and things happen that you didn't predict or didn't plan out. And it definitely was a spiritual experience. What you were saying about these characters that you loved and you just felt so honored to be privy to their, private lives and inner thoughts and emotions. I definitely felt that way. And for me, it was my love of my characters that gave me the fortitude and determination to get this book out into the world. Because as I'm sure you're aware, publishing is not for the faint of heart. So shopping it around to agents, finding a literary agent, which is a challenge for any first-time author, and then shopping it around to publishers. It was my devotion to my characters and my just desire to get them heard and get them seen and be out in the world that really fueled my persistence.
Amazing. Yeah, because it's about the animals, not about us. And that I feel so lucky to have that as a driving force.
Yes.
And I can tell you do too. I'm going to get back to the publishing side of things in just a second, but I have one more question about the book itself. Well, maybe more than one, but this one for sure. You found a number of ways to incorporate information about animal agriculture into the book. I found that one of the most successful was when another character, a not very nice one, made fun of the protagonist for her veganism. So tell us a bit about your ideas for achieving a balance with this. Like, how much info, what kind of info, and what kind of messaging?
It was a fine line to walk that. And some of it was premeditated and some was not. One thing that I did was early on in my process, one of the earlier drafts of the book, I had 4 people close to me read the novel and give me feedback. And 2 of those people were vegans and 2 were not vegans. So I really wanted to test out whether the book would appeal to only vegans or whether it would have appeal to everybody who just appreciated the story. So that was kind of a good testing grounds. It's tricky because, ideally, everyone, I believe that everyone should be vegan. It's not some grandiose aspiration. It's a pretty fundamental moral baseline. It would be hard for me to create characters that I like and respect who don't consider what's happening to non-human animals on the planet. And at the same time, realistically, we live in a world where very few people do. So it was a question of who to make vegan, how to make it realistic, and also how to make it sympathetic and also just accessible to people. It's tricky. I don't know that I always struck the right balance, but I do feel like I got in several different perspectives. The character that you mentioned, who's, the nemesis, he does a great job of poking at Julia's veganism. Julia's my main character. And, the references to her eating disorder. Oh, your veganism. And,
right.
just making it seem like it's her issue. It's her psychological issue. And then the more lackadaisical people who don't think highly of veganism, but don't know too much about it. Like one of the characters in the book is an interior designer who just tends to assume that all vegan food is disgusting. And he's just pleasantly surprised when it's not, and he tries it. So I tried to present a range of perspectives about veganism.
And I think you succeeded. It's making me think of John Yunker's writing. John Yunker has frequently been featured on Our Hen House, and one thing that people might know him for is that he wrote the radio play Sanctuary that we put on every year around Thanksgiving. And there's also that character in Sanctuary that is sort of poking fun at the vegan, and it's actually, I think, an important part of a book that has to do with veganism, because they're kind of speaking for the naysayers, and we as the vegans and as the authors have the opportunity to correct them.
Right.
All right, let's get back to what you mentioned a few minutes ago. What are some of the challenges that a new writer faces in getting a book deal?
Well, so many. I think one of the biggest challenges is just that so many people are writing, and there's just such a glut of content that it's hard to get traction if nobody knows who you are. So finding a literary agent is the first hurdle. Well, it's deciding, first of all, obviously self-publishing is an option. So for the first decision that needs to be made is whether someone wants to be traditionally published. In other words, go through an agent, literary agent, and then find a traditional publisher, or go the self-publishing route, which is becoming more and more desirable an option these days. I considered those two options and decided that I preferred the traditional publishing route just because I'm more of a writer and an artist than a marketer and promotional sort of personality. So, and self-publishing is really all about self-promotion and entrepreneurship, which I appreciate a lot and brings a lot to the table. But so my first challenge was finding a literary agent. And that was just a question of sheer persistence and viewing it as a numbers game. I just researched agents who represented the sort of fiction that I was writing and kept an Excel spreadsheet, keeping track of all my submissions to various people, asking anybody and everybody I knew if they knew any literary agents, doing all the tricks that you hear about, reading the acknowledgments in books in your genre to see who they named as their agent, if they thanked in the acknowledgments. And then after finding an agent, then it was a question of the agent shopping around and finding a publishing deal that was going to work. So 2 steps to the process. And it's the first hurdle of finding a literary agent that really is the biggest hurdle, I think, for a new time author. So I was very grateful when I found my agent, who's in New York City. And she's been great.
That is so good. It's so important to be connected with the right one. I recently switched agents, so this is my third.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think third time's a charm. I definitely jive with this one the best. And I think that there's an important factor at play, and you want to be teamed with someone who not only believes in your project, but in the longevity of your career. And that is definitely what the new one that I have is doing for me. And it's like a relationship, I could talk on and on about this. I also agree that people have self-publishing as a route, and I didn't go that route myself either. And so when people ask me about it, I'm not always sure what to say, but I think you're right that it is a lot about marketing. However, as someone who was with the big five, I had to market the hell out of both of my books.
Yes.
It's like their publishers are good for nothing, really, when it comes to that. What do you think?
Totally agree. And I'm not with a big five publisher. And so I was very cognizant of that going into this whole process. I decided that I would need to view this process as if I were self-publishing, because the publisher essentially creates a product that is going to be on the shelves. And whether I sell one of those products or a million of those products is really up to me. The publisher just doesn't have the bandwidth or the drive to let people know about this book in the way that I will. So yeah, totally with you there.
Which is why, for people who are listening to this for advice, which is why writing ability is not necessarily the main thing. In fact, it's not the main thing that people are looking for. Publishers, especially the bigger ones, are looking for people who have a platform. Agents frequently are too, not every agent, but that is why some people go the self-publishing route, because they just want their book out there. And I think there's so many more interesting opportunities for writers now. What is a hybrid publisher? I think a lot of people aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about hybrid publishing. I did connect with a couple of places. So I think essentially what they do is they provide some services that traditional publishers would provide, like namely editing and copy editing. They charge a fee for that, and then you're responsible for publishing the book and getting it out into the world. So I think I don't know a ton about that either. I was very leery of hybrid publishing. But I don't know a lot about it.
I think there's also maybe situations where, you don't get in advance, but you split the shares. You split any income that you receive with the publisher. So, but yeah, that's like, there's just so many